So my current research interest is really how the European Union and its member states can help protect the rule of law in any of the other member states. And I do that specifically at the moment by focusing on how, when the EU gives money to each of the member states in the budget, how that can be linked to rule of law enforcement. Rule of law is a basic requirement that all member states have to comply with. And there's no regulation that says you only get money if you actually keep in place these rule of law standards. So if you keep in place judicial independence, and you keep in place standards that you cannot have a corrupt administration, for example. These things were always theoretically there already, but they were never really enforced. And my research interest is how can we make sure that the rules that are already there are actually enforced, and why is that actually relevant for all member states, but also for the people who are in the two member states that are under most scrutiny at the moment, Poland and Hungary. So that's a publication I did together with the Polish ombudsman at the time, Adam Bodnar. And our argument is actually pretty straightforward. We're saying that free media are necessary for democracy to be healthy. The EU can only function as a club of healthy democracies. So that means that the EU has a vested interest in protecting free media, because otherwise it cannot itself function properly as a club. Most people will then tell you that work in the EU bubble, so to speak. Yeah, we understand that, but the EU doesn't really have any sort of competence to deal with free media. And Adam Bodnar and me basically told the world that's nonsense. The EU has plenty of opportunities to intervene. Why? Because if you're a voter in Poland and Hungary for European Parliament elections or for the local elections, there's a clear competence of the European Union to regulate how European Parliament elections and local elections are actually run. That's clearly a matter of EU competence. Well, if you're in Poland and Hungary as a voter, you can only inform yourself as a voter properly if you have access to a variety of different sources. And so that necessitates free media. So therefore, the European Union not only has a vested interest in free media in these two different countries, but also has a direct competence already. And that was the novelty of our argument. My motivation is that I'm a frustrated former civil servant. I worked on this for 10 years, both in the Ministry of the Interior in the Netherlands, but I also was an EU diplomat for the Netherlands for 4 years. And I worked on this for about 10 years, and we put in maximum effort, and we saw the rule of law go down anyway. So as a scholar, I'm now a professor, I was self-critical. Why did I fail? Why did I not help turn the tide? And that motivates me, and I want to particularly know why is it that there are many options to intervene. For example, the example I gave you earlier about linking money to rule of law requirements, that's nothing new, but why was it never implemented? I'm interested in why that is. And my take is, first, that a lot of people simply don't know that these options are there. So they believe the pitch that in order to do something meaningful, we have to create something new. That is often not at all true. That's simply a way to buy time and push the hot potato forward. But it's also often just quite complex to come with an argument that is also legally sound, because after all, the European Union is a community of law. So everything that is to be achieved has to be legally sound as well. And that's also why I'm interested in this as a lawyer. To make a real difference in the European Union, you always have to make a legally sound argument. Otherwise, it will not stand up in court. And that's also why I think that as a lawyer working in the field of politics, I can have an added value, because I've seen that also firsthand, that complex issues always boil down to a legal interpretation issue in the European Union. To some extent, I believe that lawyers often overestimate the importance of law. It's not that simply because something is laid down in a law that is immediately going to be a reality. There's all sorts of requirements necessary to make law a reality, courageous individuals, also institutions that are tailored to really implement the law. But on the other hand, I would also argue the opposite, that in international relations, the role of law is often underestimated as well, and misunderstood. Law is an extremely important context in everything that the European Union does. It's a community of law. Law also gives security of procedure. It gives particularly security to the smaller member states vis-a-vis the bigger member states. And almost everything is proceduralized, is laid down in structures and that are very detailed. So in that sense, I think that to understand properly how the European Union, in my field of research, protecting the rule of law functions, you also have to have a good understanding of how that law is much more relevant than just one of the ingredients. It's sort of a more overarching structuring element. And one particularly relevant actor that is often not so well understood and also not properly studied by many international relations scholars is actually the European Court of Justice. It sits a bit away from the immediate discussions in Brussels, of course, because it's also based in Luxembourg. But in the field that I work on, the rule of law, over the last 4 or 5 years, it has issued absolutely monumentally important judgments, for example, about judicial independence, about that you cannot have judges that are not independent and not impartial. So whatever you come up with in Poland or Hungary in alternatives simply will not stand scrutiny as a matter of union law. And that is an extremely important element of the European Union, the centrality of the law and also the centrality of the institution that protects the law, the European Court of Justice, that in my view merits very close attention, and that's what I try to contribute as a lawyer in the international relations sphere. As a young person living up in your society, it does make a difference to simply inform yourself, to be activist if needed, and apply what you learn in theory also in the way that you distribute your thoughts. So